Alright guys, I hope you've been enjoying the tutorial for the Lego blocks. This is probably going to be the last video. I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys decided to build with this, how your project came out. But I wanted to kind of show you where I'm going to take this, at some point. I'm probably going to turn this into an API for a website or something like that. But I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail on this data structure and show you something pretty cool. So let me put in my Mario image again, and I'll run this code. And what I've done is I've modified it a little bit, and I'll go into what I did in a minute, but let me show you the result first because it's pretty cool. If I can go to the right folder, it's this one here, I think. There it is. So I used my Python code to create kind of the instruction for for a user if you wanted to actually build this. And it's a really simple thing. I'll show you how I did it in a moment here. I tried to make it look a little Lego-y with this blue background and stuff. So eventually I'm going to tinker with this and make it so you can print out like a nice manual. But this is something I'd encourage you to try to start doing on your own. It's pretty simple. It's a lot of string manipulation. I'll show you in a minute. But essentially each Lego block is one of these pixels, which is just a div, which I'll show you how I did that in the code. All these are blocks. These are all just divs. And then each of them has the number on it, so that corresponds to the Lego palette color or your custom palette color. And what I did was just to make this kind of interactive to give you some ideas. When you click on these, so if you were to assemble these, you could click on these, and that way you'd know, okay, which ones you've already put on your thing, and you could kind of go through and kind of keep track as you're building this out. So it's a really simple little web page. So let me show you how I accomplished this. It's really simple. The first thing I did was I created a template HTML file, which you can do, just a very standard template HTML file. And essentially it has a title. That doesn't really matter. Essentially it has two things. So it has a h1 tag where we can set this to the project name, and that's what appears here. And it has a div tag called replace me, and this is just so we can easily find it in our Python code. We're going to replace this div with the div that contains all of our pixels. So this is just kind of a quick structure. It's kind of a quick hacky way to make a quick HTML page. So this is like the template. Again, it's just a basic HTML document with a single h1 tag and a div. Now the only thing I did was I added a script, and I just put it right into the HTML here. And the only thing that this script does is it allows us to, it has this function here. So it takes the target that was clicked. In our case, we're going to apply this function to the onClick parameter for all these divs that make up these blocks. And then when we click it, we can set the visibility to hidden. So this is just normal JavaScript here. This isn't really a JavaScript course, obviously, so if you're not familiar with JavaScript, that's okay. But essentially all this does is, this is what's called an arrow function. So this is the actual function here. In JavaScript, we can assign functions to constants actually. So that's why it's called a const hide block. But anyways, to make a long story short, it takes the target, which is whatever was clicked, and it says, okay, set this thing to hidden. And that'll actually modify our HTML. So when we click this, the browser updates and makes it hide. Now if I refresh, they'll all come back. So it's just in the browser, kind of a quick little script. So in our Python code, the way I accomplished this was pretty simple. Let me change this to Mario. So the first thing we did is, the same thing as before. We found our low resolution image, we blocked it, and we have our block data. So if you remember, I was talking in the last video that the block data is very useful for us to do what we're doing right now. Then I created a string, and I just set the HTML to blank. So this is the HTML that I want to eventually inject into this replace me section. So basically, this is going to be replaced by Python, and it's going to put in a new div and more divs that make up all the pixels, you know, something like that. All this stuff here is going to basically be injected and replace this guy right here. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to keep building up the HTML. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to open up that HTML template. So I just called it template.html, read it in. And what we do is we put all of this template text into this variable first. So that's what happens right here. And then what we do is we just modify it. So the first thing we do is I want to replace my project name, which is right here in my H1 tag. I want to replace that with the name that I give my project. So in my case, I'll replace project name with Mario. So that would cause this to become Mario after Python makes that replacement. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And then this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So we're going to create I created another variable called text, which starts with this replace me item here, since we want to keep our div. So basically when we replace this, we want to replace this entire div, but we still want to keep everything in the div here. We want to keep, it's just kind of a way to keep everything in the div. So what I'm doing is I'm starting another chunk of text, you know, that I want to inject, and I'm putting this div in first. So I'm keeping this. So when I replace this entire div, this part goes back in again. I don't want to necessarily delete it, if that makes sense. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the rows in my block data. So remember, our block data is just like this. So so our block data is a list of lists, and the first list is all the rows. So we're going to extract all the rows. And then what we're going to do is every time we hit a row, I'm going to add a div with a class called a row. So every time I start a new row, it'd be the equivalent of doing this. So I put my replace me back in, then I do div class equals row. Okay, so I'm going to put in a div with a row. And then what I'm going to do is every time I go through a row now, when I get to a block, I'm going to add this code here. And the code is another div. It's going to have a class of block. So I also created some CSS, which I won't go into. This isn't a course on, you know, HTML and CSS, but basically to make it look like this, guys, like the background and all that, and the size of these, I have these as a fixed width. I basically just wrote some quick CSS here for that. So I took this div, I assigned it with the class of block. And then this is kind of the important part. So first, to give it that functionality, I have to give it the on-click parameter, hide block this, so it can find that function right in the HTML code. It finds hide block and provides itself. And then this is kind of the special part here that gives it the colors. Over here, and this isn't best practice, obviously, you know, for web development, but it works pretty good for what we're trying to do. We want to set the CSS style to this programmatically, so we can just directly program in our style, background color. It should be an RGB color, and that, sorry, this thing's a pain in the butt because it keeps wanting to jump to the next line. And the RGB color is, you know, basically, it's driving me crazy. The RGB color is, you know, that second item, which if you remember, that's our tuple that contains our RGB values. And we want to put in our RG and B value. And that programmatically will set that element to that color. And then we want to give it the 0 element, which is the number. That's the ID number from Lego. We put inside of that div the text of that block number 0. And then we keep doing that for every block. And then afterwards we close out this div. For each row that we create, we want to close out the div. So that programmatically will will build this, and it stores all this in the text variable. And then finally, as I mentioned, what it does is after it builds that whole thing, so it builds out all of that stuff. I'm going to delete all this, otherwise it'll get screwed up. But after it builds out all of that stuff, it replaces this piece here with everything that was built up. So you end up with a div and a div and a div, you know, etc. All that gets injected into that by simply doing a simple replace. So it's going to replace that replace me div with all of this content that was built here. And then afterwards, you have a string now that contains a valid HTML document, and we can write that file out. And that's what we do. We write that out. Of course, we attach our CSS just so that we can make, you know, we get this nice background, this nice Lego looking font here. We get, you know, the fixed width and heights of all these blocks. And, you know, with that, we have a pretty nice manual. So this is something now that, you know, if you were trying to do something simple at home, you could, you know, use this to build it, and you could kind of go through if you wanted to, you know, click through and try to remember where you were. Now, it's not perfect. This is just static HTML, so if I refresh it, I lose that. So this is where it's kind of at the point now where you could take this where you want to. You could build this into a full website and use something like React and have a nice API to a backend. That's something I might actually do in the future. I'm kind of interested in doing something like that with this project. Or, you know, you could just, I mean, you could just PDF this thing out. Now, we'd have to play with the way it gets formatted, because when this thing gets shrunk, it loses that quality. So, you know, there are some, so if you copy what I did here, if you do something similar to what I did here, you're going to get a nice result kind of for a demo purpose, but it's not perfect. You know, if you want to make this better, there's a few things that we could do. We could make it a little bit better here, you know, with, you know, when we zoom in, you know, it's able to maybe scale down or something like that. Another option is we might want to display this in pages. So for example, well, I can't really zoom in good, but maybe from here to, let's say here, I'll just cut out a square here, you know, something like this. It's not a perfect square, but you're gonna get the idea here, guys. Let me just delete this stuff here. So, you know, another idea might be to actually build like do like a build manual. Maybe you want to paginate this thing, so you have pages of blocks. Okay, you're going to start with this number 1, and it's a lot easier than looking at tons of pixels. But, you know, you can think about that, and that might be something you want to try on your own. If you guys are interested though, and you really want to see this go somewhere else or go farther, let me know in the comments, and we can certainly do it if people are very interested in this project. Let me just show it off because I'm pretty proud of it. I won't adjust the title anymore, but let me just show another couple. Let's look at our Tiger King or the Lion King. I didn't actually try this one yet. I'm curious how it's going to work out. So I'm going to run this. It'll generate that HTML file. Now I can refresh my web page, and there you go. I get my Lion King. So that looks pretty good. That looks pretty cool. If I zoom out, you can see you get the Lion King effect there. I can make the Lion King a little bit bigger. I'm going to zoom it out now. So there you go. You get a really nice mosaic. That would be really cool to put on the wall. Let me do one more just for fun. My son likes Cookie Monster. So, oh, actually I got this one here. This picture is pretty cool. I don't like the musical part, but I like how it's got the Sesame Street logo on it. So I think that's pretty cool. Let's do this one. Let's do this one. All right. Let's try this one out. All right, I'm going to run this code, and I'll refresh my page. And there you go. That looks really cool. That looks really cool. I like it. I might scale it down just a little bit more. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, so even this is pretty cool. Like, if you got rid of this musical stuff here, you know, you can't read Sesame Street, but you can definitely make out Cookie Monster. You know, if you look at it at a distance, you can definitely make out, you can recognize the Sesame Street kind of signpost. If you wanted to, though, make this higher res, you could. It's just going to be more blocks to make, but it's totally doable. This looks really good. This looks really, really good. If you were to put this on your wall or something, that would come out really cool. So there you go, guys. I think that's going to end this whole series for now on this project. Again, we accomplished a lot. We were able to make a complete Lego building utility, and parse. And this last part here is all about parsing the data and actually start turning it into a good, user experience. So again, you can do the exact same thing that I did here with a standard HTML document. This script here is optional if you want to make it clickable like this, or you could do it another way. You could make it, come back in or whatever. You can use your imagination. But the point is that with this HTML document, in some good formatting, in good pagination, now we have now we already have what's starting to look like a manual for building this thing. So that's really cool. So again, let me know in the comments what you were able to build. Did you actually physically build any of these projects like I did? And I'd love to hear your feedback on this project. What other types of projects you guys are interested in doing, or is there somewhere we need to take this project further? Let me know in the comments. Take care. Have a great day.